The scorching Australian sun beat down mercilessly on the corrugated iron roof of a small bungalow nestled in the outskirts of Melbourne, Victoria. Inside, Angela Brooks stood motionless, her trembling hands clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Her vision blurred as tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to read the damning evidence once more. 2 names, 1 room, 1 night. Her husband, Elliot Carter, and a woman she had never heard of, Vanessa Reed. As the devastating realization of Elliot's betrayal sank in, a maelstrom of emotions surged through Angela's body. Shock turned to disbelief, and disbelief quickly ignited into a searing rage that threatened to consume her entirely. In that instant, the carefully constructed facade of her perfect life crumbled. Something inside her broke. The loving wife and devoted mother of 2 ceased to exist, replaced by a woman scorned, her heart hardened by betrayal, her mind clouded with thoughts of vengeance. What Angela didn't know then was that her discovery would ignite a chain of events so shocking it would send tremors across the nation. The quiet suburb of Sunshine would never be the same again. This is a story of love, betrayal, and a revenge so brutal it would make headlines far beyond Australia's shores. Angela and Elliot Carter Williams seemed to have it all. High school sweethearts turned power couple. They were the pride of their close-knit black Australian community in Sunshine, a diverse suburb west of Melbourne. Elliot, with a charming smile and easygoing demeanor, had risen from humble beginnings as a mechanic to become the owner of a thriving auto repair business. Angela, intelligent and fiercely ambitious, had recently been promoted to head nurse at the local hospital. Their home on Glenalla Road was modest but immaculate, always filled with the warmth of laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. Their children, 7-year-old Logan and 5-year-old Savannah, were their pride and joy. On weekends, the family was a familiar sight at the Sunshine Leisure Center, where Elliot taught the kids to swim while Angela cheered from the sidelines. To friends and neighbors, the Williams family embodied the Australian dream. Hardworking immigrants who had built a beautiful life from the ground up through sheer grit and unwavering love. They were active in the community, always lending a hand or offering a kind word. Their annual Christmas barbecue had become a neighborhood staple, with Elliot's famous jerk chicken drawing rave reviews from even the pickiest eaters. But behind the smiles and success, cracks had begun to form. Unbeknownst to their adoring public, Angela and Elliot's relationship had been strained for months. The stress of demanding careers and the relentless responsibilities of raising young children had taken its toll. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly now felt strained and awkward. The passion they once shared had faded into routine kisses and polite exchanges. Angela had noticed the distance. Elliot had grown cold, distracted, often working late at the shop and coming home reeking of perfume that wasn't hers. When she confronted him, he brushed it off with a chuckle, claiming a grateful female customer had gotten a little too friendly. Desperate to preserve the illusion, Angela let it go. But deep down, the doubt lingered, gnawing at her. She began to pay closer attention. There were hushed phone calls that stopped the moment she walked into the room. A sudden obsession with grooming. Mysterious weekend fishing trips with mates she'd never met. And then, during one of those trips, everything unraveled. While doing laundry, Angela found the hotel receipt tucked in the pocket of Elliot's jacket. Her heart sank. It was undeniable. The names were printed in black and white. Elliot Carter and Vanessa Reed. 1 night, 1 room. In that moment, her world imploded. And Angela Brooks, the woman who had held her family together through thick and thin, made a silent vow. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't plead. She would make him pay. What happened next would forever change the lives of everyone involved and etch Angela's name into the pages of Australian true crime history. The truth she'd been avoiding for months now stared Angela in the face, cold, unflinching, and merciless. As she stood in the center of their bedroom, the damning piece of paper trembling in her grasp, she felt like she was teetering on the edge of a cliff. Behind her lay the ruins of a life she had poured her heart into building. Ahead loomed an abyss of heartbreak, betrayal, and uncertainty. In that moment, as anger clashed with sorrow inside her, Angela Brooks made a choice, one that would change the course of her life forever. She would not be the weeping wife. She would not fall to her knees, pleading with Elliot Carter to choose her. No, she would not be a victim. Angela Brooks would rise, and when she did, she would bring with her a storm of vengeance that the quiet suburb of Sunshine and all of Australia would never forget. Vanessa Reed had never intended to cause such destruction. At 28, she was a promising physiotherapist who had recently moved from Perth to Sunshine, drawn by the suburb's vibrant sense of community and the hope of a new beginning. Tall, with flawless ebony skin and a cascade of neat braids that danced around her shoulders, Vanessa turned heads wherever she went. But it wasn't just her beauty that drew people in. It was her infectious laugh and the warmth of her presence. She had first met Elliot Carter Williams on the side of the Western Ring Road. Her car had broken down, and she was close to tears when a tow truck pulled up behind her. Behind the wheel was a man with a kind smile and calm, capable hands. Elliot quickly put her at ease, making her laugh as he hooked up her car and drove her to his repair shop back in Sunshine. Over the following weeks, as Elliot worked on fixing her aging Holden Commodore, a friendship began to form. Vanessa found herself anticipating their conversations. She was drawn to Elliot's quick wit, his deep love for his community, and the way he spoke about his business with pride. Elliot, in turn, felt an unexpected connection with Vanessa. She understood the struggles of building something from nothing, of starting fresh in a new place. It wasn't until their third encounter that Vanessa noticed the glint of a wedding ring on his finger. A sharp pang of disappointment rippled through her, followed by guilt. She had unknowingly developed feelings for a married man. Vanessa had always prided herself on her integrity. The idea of being the other woman was abhorrent to her. Sensing her emotional retreat, Elliot opened up to her. In a moment of vulnerability, he confessed that he, too, had felt the pull between them. He spoke of a crumbling marriage, of feeling invisible, misunderstood, and stuck. Vanessa, grappling with her own loneliness in a new city, tried to resist. But his words chipped away at her resolve. What started as friendship soon blurred into something more. It began with subtle gestures, a lingering touch, a prolonged glance, phone calls that stretched long into the night. Eventually, those calls became more intimate, and the tension between them impossible to ignore. Before long, there were stealing moments, hurried lunches in quiet corners, stolen kisses in parking lots, secret meetings in out-of-the-way cafes. Vanessa knew it was wrong. Guilt shadowed every encounter. She told herself she'd end it before it crossed the line. But whenever she looked into Elliot's soulful brown eyes, her resolve collapsed like a house of cards. To Elliot, Vanessa was everything Angela no longer was: exciting, carefree, full of fire. With Vanessa, he could escape the weight of bills, a struggling business, and the responsibilities of fatherhood. She made him feel alive again. But with passion came complications. The lies multiplied. Elliot's so-called fishing trips became more frequent. He spent more nights working late at the shop. Vanessa, too, began withdrawing from her budding social circle, spinning excuses to keep her weekends free for him. And then came the night that changed everything. The hotel receipt, Angela's smoking gun, was from their first night together. Until then, they had kept their physical encounters restrained, limited to stolen kisses and fleeting embraces. But that night, overwhelmed by desire and months of emotional buildup, they gave in. It was supposed to be just one night. But that single night would tear apart 3 lives and leave a trail of destruction Sunshine would never forget. They had thrown caution to the wind. As Vanessa Reed, still known as Jade to a few close friends, lay in Elliot Carter's arms in the warm aftermath of their lovemaking, a part of her knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. Guilt, her ever-present companion, now mingled uneasily with the fading glow of passion. She thought of Angela, Elliot's wife, an unseen presence that loomed at the edges of her mind like a shadow. A wave of shame crashed over her. "We can't keep doing this," she whispered into the darkness of the hotel room. Elliot pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead. "I know," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "But I don't know how to stop." Neither of them could have imagined the devastating consequences their choices would unleash. As they lay there, entwined, intoxicated, deluded, the seeds of destruction had already begun to sprout, sending quiet tendrils of chaos into the lives of everyone around them. The day Angela Brooks' world shattered began like any other. She woke before dawn, gently kissed her still sleeping children, and headed off to the hospital for an early shift. The weight of suspicion had been pressing on her chest for weeks, heavier with every unexplained late night and every hollow excuse. But she pushed it aside, like she always did, channeling her focus into the patients who needed her strength more than her doubts did. It wasn't until she returned home that evening, bone-tired from a grueling 12-hour shift, that something felt off. Elliot's car was in the driveway, but the house was eerily quiet. There were no clanging pots from the kitchen, no shrieks of laughter from Logan or Savannah. Even the television, usually humming softly in the background, was silent. "Elliot," she called out. "Logan? Savannah?" Her voice echoed back at her, unanswered. A folded note sat neatly on the kitchen counter. "Took the kids to Mum's for the night. Thought you could use some rest after your long shift. Love, E." Any other day, Angela might have smiled at the thoughtfulness, but tonight, it only amplified her unease. Elliot had been oddly attentive lately, offering to run errands, cooking dinner, rubbing her shoulders after work. It was sweet, too sweet, like he was trying to cover up something. Acting on an impulse she couldn't quite name, Angela walked quietly to their bedroom. She stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking. This room had been their sanctuary for over a decade. How many nights had they lain here, whispering secrets and sharing dreams in the dark? How many mornings had begun with the warmth of his arms wrapped around her? Almost without thinking, she moved toward Elliot's side of the closet. Her fingers brushed across the row of pressed shirts, pausing briefly as she breathed in the comforting scent of his cologne. Then, deep inside the pocket of his favorite jacket, her hand closed around something foreign. A receipt. The paper burned against her skin. Angela unfolded it slowly, dread mounting with every breath. And there was 2 names, 1 room, 1 night. Vanessa Reed and Elliot Carter. The evidence of betrayal spelled out in black and white. Her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor. The receipt clutched her chest like a wound. She couldn't stop bleeding. She didn't know how long she sat there, numb and silent, replaying every suspicious moment, every lie, every late night, every flimsy excuse she had forced herself to believe. Outside, the sun had long since vanished. Inside, the only light came from the dim hallway lamp, casting a pale glow on her tearless face. Eventually, she stirred. Her legs ached. Her throat was dry. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of wine, her hands still shaking. As the rich red liquid slid down her throat, a strange calm washed over her. The grief was still there, but something else had taken root, something colder, more focused. Rage. Angela's mind turned to Vanessa Reed, the woman whose name had appeared alongside her husband's on that receipt. Who was she? What did she look like? What did she have that Angela didn't? She set down her wine and opened her laptop with deliberate intent. It didn't take long. Sunshine wasn't that big, and Vanessa Reed had a public profile. The moment her page loaded, Angela felt like she'd been punched in the gut. There she was, young, beautiful, radiant, smiling like she hadn't destroyed a family. Angela scrolled through photo after photo, each image striking her like a blade. Each smile for Vanessa felt like a fresh betrayal. There were pictures of Vanessa at the beach, her lithe body clad in a tiny bikini. Jade, her online nickname, laughing a local cafe, head thrown back in carefree delight. Vanessa volunteering at a community event, her face glowing with kindness and purpose. As Angela Brooks stared at the smiling images of the woman who had stolen her husband, something inside her hardened. Whatever fragments remained of the trusting, loving wife she once was had been reduced to dust. In their place stood a woman fueled by rage and consumed with thoughts of retribution. She thought of the years she had given Elliot Carter, the sacrifices made, the dreams deferred, the nights spent alone so he could build their future. She thought of their 2 children, innocent casualties caught in a web of deceit spun by the man she had once called her soulmate. And she thought of their community, the neighbors who admired them, the friends who would soon be whispering, judging, scandalized. As the clock crept past midnight and silence hung heavy over the house, Angela made a decision. She would not be the broken woman sobbing in the shadows, pitted and discarded. She would not give Elliot and his mistress the satisfaction of destroying her. No, Angela Brooks would have her revenge, and it would be a reckoning neither Elliot Carter nor Vanessa Reed would ever forget. As she shut her laptop with deliberate calm, a plan began to form, bold, dangerous, possibly even criminal. But as she pictured the look on Elliot's face when he realized the cost of his betrayal, a grim smile curled at the corners of her lips. Let them enjoy their affair. Let them believe they had gotten away with it. Because when the time came, Angela would teach them both the true meaning of passion and pain. In the days that followed, Angela moved through life like a woman possessed. On the outside, she wore her usual mask, caring mother, competent nurse, pleasant neighbor. But beneath that calm surface, her thoughts were a storm of fury and precision. She began watching Elliot with new eyes. Every shift in his routine, every poorly veiled lie stood out in sharp relief. She noticed how he lingered on his phone, smirking at messages he quickly tucked away. She smelled the new cologne he hadn't worn before. She saw the extra care he took with his appearance. Ironed shirts, fresh shaves, and haircuts more frequent than usual. Each detail added fuel to her growing fire. But Angela didn't act on impulse. She understood that revenge required patience. Strategy. She had to lull him into complacency. So she played the part of the loving, unsuspecting wife to perfection. Smiles, soft kisses, dinners on the table. Elliot had no idea the woman beside him had already started laying the groundwork for his downfall. Her first step was gathering information. With skills sharpened from years in nursing, managing complex patient files, noticing inconsistencies in behavior, Angela began piecing together the truth behind Elliot and Vanessa's affair. She tracked his movements, noted patterns in his late nights and emergency meetings. She reviewed bank statements and spotted small but consistent cash withdrawals that couldn't be explained. But it wasn't enough to know. She needed to see it with her own eyes. On a sweltering Tuesday afternoon, Angela called in sick to work for the first time in her career. Dressed in plain clothes, large sunglasses hiding her eyes, she positioned herself in a cafe across from Elliot's auto shop. Time dragged. Every minute felt like an hour. She stirred the same cup of coffee over and over, heart pounding with tension and anticipation. Just when doubt started to creep in, when she thought she'd wasted her only chance, there she was. Vanessa Reed, even more stunning in person. Confident, radiant. She strode across the street, heels clicking, and disappeared into the shop. Angela's breath caught in her throat. 15 agonizing minutes later, Elliot emerged. He locked up the shop, despite it being the middle of the day, and walked to his car with Vanessa by his side. Hand in hand, their body language was unmistakable, intimate, familiar. Not two people sneaking around, but lovers completely entangled in each other's world. As they drove away, Angela felt a surge of emotion rise within her, a turbulent mix of vindication and devastation. Her suspicions were no longer suspicions. The truth was right there, undeniable, raw, and cruel. She had wanted the truth. Now she had it. And with that truth came something far more powerful than grief. Purpose. It was a pain unlike anything she had ever experienced. That night, as Angela lay wide awake beside her peacefully sleeping husband, the final pieces of her plan locked into place. It would demand precise timing, steady nerves, and a level of ruthlessness she hadn't known she possessed until now. But as she pictured Elliot Carter and Vanessa Reed together, wrapped in the comfort of a love built on betrayal, Angela knew she would stop at nothing. Not now. Not after everything. In the weeks that followed, her preparations escalated with quiet intensity. She made a series of seemingly innocent purchases: a new set of kitchen knives, a bottle of high-strength sleeping pills, and a prepaid mobile phone. She began researching human anatomy, specifically the male reproductive system, with a detached curiosity that masked her true intent. Late into the night, while Elliot slept inches away, Angela studied diagrams and articles, mentally rehearsing every step of what she was about to do. But she didn't stop at logistics. Angela began crafting the perfect alibi. She confided in a few close friends about the growing tension in her marriage, subtly planting seeds of concern. She told them Elliot had been distant, irritable, unfaithful. None of it true, not yet, but all of it necessary. She even started keeping a diary, filled with fictional accounts of heated arguments and her rising anxiety over Elliot's suspicious behavior. It was a masterstroke in misdirection, building a paper trail that would later seem hauntingly prophetic. As the day of reckoning approached, Angela was surprised by the eerie calm that settled over her. The initial sting of betrayal had hardened into a cold, crystalline resolve. She no longer saw herself as a victim. She was no longer a character in Elliot's story. She was the author now, and she was about to pen the final chapter of Elliot Carter and Vanessa Reed's affair in blood-red ink. On the night before everything was set to unfold, Angela tucked her children into bed with more tenderness than usual. She kissed their foreheads slowly, inhaling their sweet innocence. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was she really prepared to risk everything? Her freedom? Her children's future? Could revenge ever truly be worth the price? But then she pictured Elliot and Vanessa, tangled in each other's arms, blind to the destruction they had caused. She thought of the dreams she had set aside, the love she had poured into a marriage now reduced to rubble. No, there was no turning back. Tomorrow, Elliot Carter Williams would learn the true cost of betrayal, and Angela Brooks, the woman he had underestimated, would be the one to collect the debt. The morning dawned bright and cheerful, a perfect spring day hiding the darkness that loomed beneath its surface. Angela moved through her routine like clockwork, making breakfast, packing lunchboxes, smiling for her children. Elliot, still clueless, kissed her on the cheek before heading to work. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, Angela moved. She quickly changed into the nondescript outfit she had prepared, a simple hoodie and jeans, and tucked her hair under a plain cap. She grabbed the bag she had packed the night before. Inside were the tools of her vengeance: a freshly sharpened kitchen knife, a bottle of chloroform obtained through questionable means, and a pair of latex gloves. Her first stop was Elliot's auto shop. Disguised under the pretense of dropping off lunch, she entered his office and located his phone. Her hands didn't shake. With practiced efficiency, she installed a tracking app, one that would allow her to monitor his movements in real time. Then, without a word, she slipped back out. Her next destination was Vanessa's apartment. Luck was on Angela's side. As she approached the modest complex, she saw the young physiotherapist leaving for work. Angela trailed her from a distance, careful not to draw attention. She followed Vanessa to the small clinic where she practiced, noting every detail: the number of staff, the security at the front desk, the schedule posted on the door. Every detail was a weapon. Every observation, another thread in the intricate web she was weaving. The day dragged on, each hour an exercise in endurance. Angela's nerves were stretched taut, her stomach in knots, but her focus never faltered. As evening fell, her phone buzzed. The tracking app lit up. Elliot's car was moving. Destination: Vanessa's apartment. Angela exhaled slowly. It was time. She stood, adjusted her cap, and slipped out into the night, toward the apartment complex and toward the final act of her carefully orchestrated revenge. Her heart pounded so violently she was sure someone would hear it echoing in the narrow corridor. Angela positioned herself in a shadowy alcove near Vanessa's apartment door, waiting with the cold patience of a predator stalking its prey. Every nerve in her body was coiled tight, but her focus was razor-sharp. She didn't have to wait long. Soon, she heard laughter, light intoxicated, and the sound of hushed voices. Peering around the corner, she saw them, Elliot, Carter, and Vanessa, stumbling toward the apartment, tangled in each other's arms. Their bodies clung together as if the world around them didn't exist. The sight hit Angela like a knife to the chest. A fresh surge of pain and fury surged through her, steel-hard and pulsing. She steadied herself. This was the moment she had prepared for. There was no turning back now. As Vanessa fumbled with her keys, distracted by Elliot's roaming hands and soft whispers, Angela made her move. In one fluid, practiced motion, she stepped out of the shadows and pressed a chloroform-soaked cloth tightly over Vanessa's face. The young woman's eyes widened in stunned confusion, then fluttered shut. Her body went limp. Elliot froze in shock. His mouth opened to scream, but Angela was faster. The knife glinted under the dim hallway light as she pressed it to his throat. Not a sound. She hissed, her voice low, cold, and unrecognizable, even to herself. Elliot, stunned into terrified obedience, nodded. Together, they dragged Vanessa's unconscious body into the apartment. As the door shut behind them with a soft thud, Angela felt reality lurch sideways. Her carefully constructed plan began to unravel. The weight of what she had just done, what she was about to do, hit her like a sledgehammer to the chest. But it was too late. The line had already been crossed. With trembling hands, she bound Vanessa to a chair using zip ties, then turned to face her husband. Elliot stood frozen, wide-eyed. A mask of confusion and horror spread across his face. He looked at Angela like he didn't recognize her. And maybe, in that moment, he didn't. Why? Was all she could manage, the question breaking on a whisper. Elliot's mouth opened, then closed again, no words forming. His eyes darted between Angela and Vanessa, panic rising in his chest. "I trusted you," she said, her voice gaining volume and power. "I gave you everything. My love, my youth, our children, and this is how you repay me." She stepped forward, each word cutting deeper than the last. As she advanced, Elliot instinctively backed away until he tripped and fell onto the bed, the very one where he had shattered the life they had built together. What happened next was a blur of anguish and uncontrollable rage. Angela moved on instinct, driven by a fury she hadn't known lived inside her. The knife slashed through the air, and Elliot's screams tore through the silence. Blood, so much blood, splattered the white sheets, staining them crimson. By the time the red haze began to clear from her vision, Angela found herself standing over her husband, the bloody knife trembling in her hand. Elliot lay curled in a fetal position, clutching his groin, his body racked with sobs and agonized wails. She had done it. She had made him pay, but the gravity of it crushed her all at once. Angela stumbled back, the knife slipping from her fingers and clattering to the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the apartment, snapping her out of the trance. What had she done? This wasn't justice. This was madness. Brutality. Irreversible. In the living room, she heard Vanessa stir, her groggy voice mumbling incoherently as consciousness slowly returned. Panic gripped Angela's chest. What now? There was no escape, no clean way out, no rewind button to undo what had just happened. As the sounds of Elliot's pained moans and Vanessa's confused murmurs filled the space, Angela did the only thing left to do. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone and dialed 3 numbers she had hoped she'd never need. 000. Emergency services in Australia. A calm voice answered on the other end. "What's your emergency?" Angela's breath hitched. She could barely form the words. I need help," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I've done something terrible." As she gave the operator the address, her knees buckled and she sank slowly to the floor. The adrenaline drained from her body all at once, leaving her numb, hollow, and haunted. The fury that had once driven her, sharp, blinding, all-consuming, was gone. In its place, a hollow emptiness settled deep within Angela. In the distance, she could already hear the wailing of approaching sirens. It was over. Her marriage, her freedom, the life she had once known, all lost in the span of a few moments of unimaginable violence. As the sound of heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs toward the apartment, Angela closed her eyes and waited for the inevitable. She had wanted revenge. She had wanted Elliot Carter and Vanessa Reed to feel the pain they had inflicted on her. But in the end, it was Angela who would pay the highest price. The days and weeks that followed passed in a dazed blur. Angela moved through a world that now felt foreign and hostile, a world forever altered by what she had done. The consequences of her actions rippled through multiple lives, including her own, and there was no escaping them. The media frenzy erupted almost immediately. News outlets across Australia seized on the sensational story with insatiable hunger. "Scorned wife's shocking revenge," the headline screamed. Angela's mugshot, her face pale and twisted with anguish in the moment of her arrest, was plastered across television screens and front pages. It became an iconic image overnight. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some saw Angela as a broken woman pushed past her limits, a victim who had cracked under the unbearable weight of betrayal. Others viewed her as a cold-blooded criminal, a vengeful fury who had committed a horrifying act of violence. Talk shows and social media platforms exploded with debates, filled with armchair psychologists and self-styled relationship experts offering their unsolicited judgments. For Elliot Carter, the physical pain of the attack was only part of the torment. The humiliation of his affair being laid bare for the entire nation to witness compounded his suffering. From his hospital bed, under police guard and far from the media's cameras, he was forced to confront the consequences of his own infidelity. Once a successful businessman and respected member of the community, Elliot had become a symbol of disgrace. His reputation was shattered. Vanessa Reed, though physically unharmed, carried psychological wounds that ran deep. The vibrant, confident young woman became a shell of herself, haunted by nightmares and sudden panic attacks. She shut down her physiotherapy clinic, retreated from public view, and faded from the community she had once embraced. But it was the children, Logan and Savannah, who suffered the most. In a single night, their world collapsed. Their mother was in jail. Their father, mutilated and bedridden. Confused and terrified, they were placed in the care of grandparents who struggled to protect them from the relentless media storm swirling around the family. As the case wound its way through the legal system, more details emerged, details that painted a tragic picture of betrayal, jealousy, and simmering rage. Angela's methodical planning came under scrutiny. Her purchase history, her research, and most damning of all, her diary, originally intended to build a false alibi, was now used by prosecutors as proof of premeditation. When the trial finally began, it became one of the most high-profile courtroom spectacles the country had seen in years. Each day, journalists fought for a spot in the press section. Curious members of the public lined up outside the courthouse, eager to witness the drama unfold. Angela, pale and gaunt in her prison uniform, sat silently through the proceedings. Her once fiery demeanor had vanished. What remained was a hollow-eyed woman, seemingly broken by the enormity of what she had done. Expert witnesses were called to dissect her mental state. Was this a crime of passion, a momentary loss of control, or was it a calculated act of vengeance, carefully orchestrated from start to finish? The prosecution painted her as a cold and deliberate attacker. The defense countered that Angela had been emotionally abused and pushed beyond her breaking point. Throughout the trial, Angela spoke only when directly addressed by the judge. She offered no dramatic testimony, no pleas for mercy. She merely existed, silent, numb, and unrecognizable from the woman she once was. The fire that had once driven her had burned itself out, leaving nothing behind but ashes and regret. Angela Brooks sat quietly in the defendant's chair, her expression vacant, almost confused by the proceedings unfolding around her. When the verdict was finally read, it sent shockwaves not only through the courtroom, but across the country. She was found guilty of grievous bodily harm with intent, though the court acknowledged significant mitigating circumstances. In his sentencing remarks, the judge spoke somberly of the tragic and highly unusual nature of the case. He did not excuse Angela's actions, but acknowledged the emotional devastation caused by Elliot Carter's betrayal, the infidelity that had ignited the sequence of events. Angela was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 4. As the sentence was delivered, a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Some believed it was too lenient. Others felt it was too severe. But for Angela, the number hardly mattered. Her real punishment wasn't prison. It was living with what she had done and the irreparable damage she had inflicted on the people she loved most. As she was led away, Angela caught one last glimpse of Elliot Carter, seated quietly in the public gallery. Their eyes met. In that fleeting moment, a lifetime's worth of love, betrayal, pain, and regret passed silently between them. Then, just like that, she was gone, escorted to begin her sentence, leaving behind a shattered family and a community forever changed by her actions. In the years that followed, the Williams case became a symbol, a cautionary tale about the destructive power of infidelity and unchecked emotion. It sparked national conversations about mental health, the pressures of modern relationships, and the blurred line between justice and revenge. For those directly affected, life was never the same. Elliot Carter, bearing both physical and emotional scars, struggled to rebuild his life and reconnect with his children. His reputation as a respected businessman had been destroyed, and whispers followed him wherever he went. Vanessa Reed, though unharmed physically, was deeply traumatized by the attack. The vibrant, confident woman who had once lit up a room now lived in shadows. She shut down her clinic, moved away from sunshine, and vanished from public life. Some said she returned to Perth. Others believed she left the country altogether, running from the notoriety that clung to her name. But perhaps no one was more deeply affected than the children, Logan and Savannah. Overnight, their world collapsed. Their mother was in prison. Their father was in the hospital. And they were thrust into the care of bewildered grandparents who could barely shield them from the chaos. The long-term impact on their emotional development was quietly profound. As for Angela, her time in prison was marked by reflection and remorse. The rage that had once consumed her had long since burned out. All that remained was sorrow and silence. Her prison cell was small, but its walls were lined with photos of Logan and Savannah. Every time she looked at their faces, she was haunted by a single, torturous question. Was revenge worth the price she had paid? There were no winners in this story, only victims, each carrying their own scars, each left to navigate the wreckage of a life that had once seemed picture-perfect, shattered by betrayal, passion, and a single, irreversible act of violence. The sun was setting over sunshine the day Angela Brooks walked out of the prison gates. A small canvas bag, filled with the few possessions she had accumulated during her incarceration, hung from her shoulder. After serving 4 years, she had been granted parole. Her model behavior, deep remorse, and willingness to participate in counseling had worked in her favor. But the world she returned to was vastly different. Sunshine had moved on. The scandal that had once dominated headlines was now nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties. Yet for Angela, every corner of the town held memories. Every building, every street sign, a reminder of what she had lost and the pain she had caused. Waiting at the gates were her parents and her now teenage children, Logan and Savannah. The reunion was tearful and awkward. So much time had passed, so many words left unsaid. Angela could barely recognize her children. Their faces had matured, their eyes filled with a mixture of love, confusion, and guarded hope. Her heart ached for the years she had missed. Elliot Carter was not there. Their divorce had been finalized during her incarceration, a final, legal severing of the bond that had once seemed unbreakable. She had heard whispers that he'd left sunshine altogether, unable to bear the judgmental stares and murmurs that followed him everywhere. As for Vanessa, she had disappeared without a trace. In the days and weeks that followed her release, Angela struggled to find her place in a world that had kept moving without her. The world had moved on without her. Angela's nursing license had been revoked. Her once respected professional reputation was in ruins. Friends who had once filled her life with warmth and laughter now crossed the street to avoid her gaze. She had become a symbol of scandal, a woman remembered not for the life she had built, but for the moment she lost control. And yet, slowly, painfully, Angela began to rebuild. She found a job at a local charity, where her natural compassion and deep desire for redemption made her a valuable asset. Helping others who had lost their way gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She threw herself into therapy, attending every session with quiet determination. Through hours of self-reflection and emotional work, she began to unravel the pain and suppressed rage that had once consumed her. Her relationship with her children was more fragile. It was a delicate dance, one step forward, two steps back, of reconnection and forgiveness. There were painful conversations, tears shed over missed birthdays, school milestones, and lost years. But in between the sorrow, there were also moments of hope. Laughter, tentative at first, began to bloom again as they slowly rediscovered each other. About 6 months after her release, on a bright and quiet afternoon, Angela found herself standing outside what had once been Elliot Carter's auto shop. The building had changed. The once oily garage had been transformed into a sleek, trendy cafe, complete with potted plants and floor-to-ceiling windows. Angela stared at it for a long moment. This was the very spot where, years ago, she had watched her husband wrap his arms around another woman, where her life had first begun to unravel. But instead of the rage and bitterness she expected to feel, something else settled over her. Peace. The betrayal, the fury, the heartbreak. They felt like they belonged to someone else now. Another version of Angela. In their place was a deep, sorrowful acceptance for everything that had been lost, softened by a cautious hope for what might still be possible. As she turned to leave, her reflection caught her eye in the cafe window. The woman staring back at her looked older, wearier, but also stronger. There was a quiet resilience in her eyes, a strength born not from perfection, but from survival, from having faced the fire and walked through it scarred, but still standing. And in that moment, Angela understood something deeply. She couldn't rewrite the past. She couldn't undo the damage or erase the hurt. But she could choose how she moved forward. She could shape what came next. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more hard conversations, more moments of doubt. Rebuilding trust with her children, reclaiming her place in a town that had moved on without her. It would take time. It would take patience, humility, and courage. But for the first time in years, Angela felt ready. She had survived the darkest chapter of her life. And in doing so, she had discovered parts of herself she never knew existed. The woman who had once been consumed by vengeance was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone wiser, battle-worn, but not broken. Angela turned away from the cafe and took a deep breath, feeling the sun warm her face. With each step she took down the familiar streets of sunshine, she wasn't just walking away from her past. She was walking toward something new, a future not defined by rage or regret, but by resilience, redemption, and the quiet hope of beginning again. The story of Angela Brooks, of love, betrayal, and revenge, had once captivated a nation. But now, as she disappeared into the rhythm of everyday life in the suburb she once called home, Angela knew the most important part of her story was still ahead. And this time, she would write it on her own terms, with hard-earned wisdom and a heart open to the promise of what lay ahead. Angela knew she was crossing a line long before she stepped out of the shadows that night. But what truly haunted her wasn't the moment of violence. It was everything that had led up to it. In the quiet stillness of her bedroom, during those weeks of planning, she had come face to face with the woman she had become. It terrified her. The mirror no longer reflected a nurturer or a caregiver. It reflected someone forged in betrayal, someone whose love had been weaponized into something cold, calculated, and irreversibly dangerous. There were moments, late at night, when doubt crept in like a fog. She would sit on the edge of the bed, watching Elliot sleep soundly, his face still holding traces of the boy she had fallen in love with back in high school. "What happened to us?" she would whisper into the silence. But the silence never answered, and each time she was left staring into the abyss of what-ifs and whys. As the plan neared execution, she began documenting letters to her children, not ones she intended to send, but ones she needed to write. In them, she poured out her heartbreak, her confusion, and the unbearable weight of the love she still carried for them. "If you ever read this," one letter began, "know that I didn't stop being your mother. Even when I was lost, even when I was wrong." After the attack, in the sterile isolation of her jail cell, those letters became her sanctuary. She read them over and over, sometimes aloud to herself in the darkness, sometimes silently with trembling fingers. It reminded her of who she had been and who she still hoped to be. During the trial, when her children visited with her parents in tow, Angela's heart shattered all over again. Logan, now 8, refused to look her in the eyes. Savannah, sweet and innocent, clung to her grandmother's leg like a shield. The separation wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Her children no longer saw her as a protector. She had become a stranger in their story. Her prison counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Merida, encouraged her to find meaning in the mess. "You can't erase the past," she said one day, "but you can decide what kind of person you'll be from this moment on." Those words settled deep in Angela's bones. She began volunteering in the prison infirmary, assisting with minor tasks and comforting inmates who had no one else. Slowly, she rediscovered her purpose, not as a nurse licensed by a board, but as a human being capable of kindness, even in a place defined by punishment. The night she was granted parole, Angela didn't sleep. She sat by the small window of her cell, watching the moonlight filter through the bars. She thought of the first night she held Logan in her arms, the way his tiny fingers had wrapped around hers like a promise. She remembered Savannah's laughter, bright and musical, echoing through the house during lazy Sunday mornings. She had lost so much, but she was still here. In the months following her release, Angela kept to herself, focusing on rebuilding the relationships that mattered. Her children were hesitant, understandably so, but there were moments, small, fragile ones, where hope took root. Savannah asked her to braid her hair one evening. Logan agreed to watch an old movie they used to love. These were victories, quiet ones, but they meant the world. Angela also began writing, not just letters, but a memoir of sorts, a record of how love, betrayal, and pain had shaped her. She didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but it helped her process the chaos she had lived through. Each page was a confession and a step toward healing. One afternoon, while walking past a bookstore in the city, she saw a mother kneeling to fix her daughter's shoelace. The simple act brought tears to Angela's eyes, not from regret, but from a newfound appreciation of the quiet, everyday beauty she once took for granted. She knew the road ahead would be long. Forgiveness was not guaranteed. Trust cannot be forced. But Angela Brooks was no longer a woman defined by a single act of vengeance. She was a survivor, a mother, and perhaps one day, a source of healing for others who found themselves walking the razor's edge between love and despair.